Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching Focal Length, where we bring you insights on key international developments. As the United Nations marks its 80th session under the theme Better Together, questions loom over whether multilateralism remains a unifying force or is fracturing under geopolitical strain. From wars in Gaza to Ukraine and to climate disasters and deepening divides in global governance, as the UN faces mounting scrutiny over its effectiveness and moral authority. The General Assembly, once seen as the conscience of the international community, now mirrors shifting alliances and competing national interests. In this context, debates over reform, accountability, and the future of collective action have never been more urgent. Joining us now is María Fernanda Espinosa, 73rd President of the United Nations, a seasoned Ecuadorian diplomat with over 2 decades of multilateral experience. She has served from September 2018 to September 2019. She brought the role of her background as Ecuador's Foreign Minister and Minister of Human Mobility. She remains one of the few women ever to lead the UN General Assembly. Today, she discusses the state of multilateralism and the UN's role in an increasingly divided world. From UN's Better Together to reform, accountability, and climate justice, she reflects on global conflicts and shifting alliances. Thank you for joining us, María Fernanda Espinosa. We're grateful to have you here with us now. My first question to you is, the 80th session theme was Better Together. In your view, is the world still better together, or is multilateralism fragmenting under pressure?
I have to say, first of all, thank you for having me. And I have to say that the motto, Better Together, expresses the need to recommit to multilateralism and the need to see the value of and the need for greater international cooperation in a world that it has to face many challenges that go beyond national borders, whether it's cybersecurity or pandemics or global supply chains or peace and security challenges. I think that everything has to be addressed by the international community through cooperation, through collective action. And the Better Together is a call to remind ourselves that multilateralism is more needed than ever, and that international cooperation is more needed than ever. And global solidarity is what it's needed in the world of today, where we see rising poverty, rising inequalities, rising hunger around the world. So the challenges are great, and that requires collective action and for us to be united and working together.
You've presided over a system often called bureaucratic and sprawling. What is the single reform you would push to make the UN leaner, more agile, and harder to ignore by great powers?
I think it's very difficult to say this is the one reform that is needed. Of course, what the UN requires is an overhaul that is holistic, that is structural, that is profound. That starts with the way budgets are set up, the way priorities are established by member states. Member states are the owners of the organization, the way the alignment between the political priorities and the work of the Secretariat, which has an executive role, have to come hand in hand. A budget of an organization is its political expression of priorities, issues of accountability, issues of transparency in the use of the resources of the organization are extremely important, and independent controller of the organization is absolutely vital and critical. And also to understand that we operate in a very different world compared to 80 years ago. I think that the power dynamics have shifted. We live in a multipolar world. We live in a world where the voices, the power, the traction of other countries are out there at the table, and we have to bring that also into account. So I think that we need, as you mentioned, a leaner organization, a more impact-driven. More bureaucracy doesn't necessarily means more impact or greater impact. What we need to do is prioritize better, do more with less, and adapt to the very, changing geopolitics, a platform of and a distribution of power that is very different than what we used to see 80 years ago. The decolonization process, the fact of having a UN charter that was signed by 51 countries, and the current scenario with 193 member states in the organization is telling us that the organization, the bureaucracy, the priorities really need to adapt to the current times. As I said, not only the political and geopolitical landscape, but also to adapt to the new challenges of the world of today. Starting, as I mentioned, with issues of the new technologies, digitalization, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, climate change, and the threats that climate change pose, the issues of pandemics and global health, and all these issues require collective action and working together.
UNGA voting in 2025 has revealed emerging blocs with different alignments on Ukraine, the Middle East, and beyond. How much do you see the UNGA as a barometer of new global alliances, and how did you navigate that as a president?
I think that the world is always been a diverse world. The world of today also brings in new powers, new forms of alignment, new groups, either thematic groups, economic groups, geopolitical groups coming together. If you look for example, at the G7 or the G20, where India has had a tremendous leading role, especially when India presided over the G20. When you look at the BRICS and the BRICS Plus configurations, you see that there are many the regional configurations, the African Union, ASEAN, CELAC of my own region, all these regional groupings or interest groups or economic coalitions bring the UN to a different position. And I would say that we have to see these as a great advantage because these groupings have to find a universal platform where they all come together. And this universal platform is called the United Nations, with its flaws, of course, with the need for a profound reform, of course, but it continues to be this global universal platform that brings everybody and every grouping together.
Looking at Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, is the fault the UN's or the political will of member states? Where does this accountability lie?
Well, as we speak, there are more than 100 active armed conflicts in the world. Some make the headlines, like the Middle East, of course, very, very important, Ukraine, but there is also Yemen and Sudan in DRC, and the Sahel, many places around the world where security is a real challenge. And I have to say that one of the issues where the UN needs to double down on is investing in preventive diplomacy, investing in a very assertive oversight, assertive information, data, intelligence, analytics that would improve the capacity of the organization to prevent conflicts before they explode. And I think that role the UN needs to really invest on preventive diplomacy. You said your question was: is it the fault of the UN not working well? Is it the fault of the member states? And I have to say that the UN is owned by the member states, and there is a shared responsibility between the executive arm, which is the Office of the Secretary General, the specialized program agencies and programs of the UN, and there is the political UN, the members, the member states, and that is, of course, a shared responsibility to come together with prevention, with oversight, but also with the needed deployment of humanitarian aid, of peacekeeping, of peace building. And peace building has to be strongly connected to the development agenda. There is no better way to build peace than to bring development, well-being, a life with dignity to the people. And I think that's also something that the UN as a political system needs to be very conscious of. First of all, the need to deploy the work so it can benefit the people on the ground. The principle of subsidiarity, we want to call it that way. But also, we have to remember that the UN is the kitchen, the space for the crafting of international law. So we really need to make sure that international law is respected, that the principles of the Charter are respected, that we also remember and acknowledge the importance of a very basic principle of the sovereign equality among states, in that the system has to be be people-centered and deliver for people on the ground. When I say this, it means that there's no easy answer or quick fix for the organization. The structural changes that need to happen hopefully at the same time. It has to be holistic. It has to deal with the complexity of the world of today, and it has to be owned by member states who have to lead the transformation that the UN needs.
With countries like Pakistan suffering catastrophic floods, the climate justice question is more urgent than ever. How do you balance calls for loss and damage compensation, adaptation, and mitigation, especially from nations that rarely pollute?
I think that the issue of climate justice will be a defining issue in the future. I think that the climate shocks are hurting so many people, first of all, and having effects on displacement of massive, I would say, immigration due to the shocks, massive economic and financial losses, infrastructure losses. And this is really hurting, especially the countries that are more vulnerable to climate shocks, small island developing states, countries that are landlocked, mountain ecosystems. And this is hurting not only countries of the global south, it's also hurting the more developed economies, if we want to call them that way, the industrialized economies. So fires, droughts, floods, hurricanes are affecting millions and millions of people. So after almost 30 conferences of the parties of the Convention on Climate Change, I think it is about time that we double down on the political will to ensure that the enabling conditions for climate actions are there, they are fair, they are just, they are implementable, and they're action oriented. And by that, I mean climate finance, the resources that are needed. We are speaking about the need of trillions of dollars. During the last COP, the world agreed on $300 billion per year, but we know that this is largely insufficient. We hope that during COP30, we are going to see scaling up of the resources, but also the transfer of low carbon technologies is vital, especially for developing countries, and the capacity, building capacity, and a just transition in terms of the energy matrix. We have hundreds of millions of people that do not have access to electricity. So a just transition with renewable energies is much needed. But the issue of financing, of access to low carbon technologies and renewables, and the issue of, again, of capacity is a must. I think that if we want to see sustainable development, inclusive development, a life with dignity for the majority of people in this in planet Earth, we really need to be serious and conscious that a major scaling up of the political commitment and the resources need to be there, and to rebalance investment in mitigation and decreasing emissions with regard to the investment in adaptation, in resilience building, especially in the global majority countries.
When you look back at your time leading the General Assembly and at what the UN has become 80 years on, do you believe the institution has lived up to its promise?
As I said, the UN has done many good things. If you look from vaccination to the human rights architecture that we have in our hands, the humanitarian deployment in cases and situations of crisis and suffering, there's so many, the decolonization process that has been so important for the new configuration of the world. So we have to thank the UN. I think that the world is a better place because of the UN. But at the same time, the institution that we created 80 years ago, it has to be completely retooled and restructured because the world has changed dramatically. The power structures, the new geopolitical configurations, the new economics, the trade and supply chains, the new crisis. I mentioned the crisis on cybersecurity, the digital era and the new technologies and the use of artificial intelligence, the challenges in global health and pandemics. Really required a rethinking. And I would say it's not only climate change, it's an Earth system crisis that we are experiencing because we have depleted the critical resources, and we really need to come up with smart solutions to better govern our environmental commons. So the system needs to adapt, the institution needs to adapt to the needs of today. It has to be demand driven. And all these transformations have to happen under the political guidance of member states and the executive arm, strong arm of the executive, the Secretary General, the Secretariat of the organization that has to do its part. I cannot think of a world without the UN, but we need a better UN. We need a UN that is leaner, that is more accountable, that is more effective, that transforms the people, the people, especially the people in shortage, in difficulties, in suffering different crises. The UN has to address these issues. And of course, the main responsibility lies in the sovereign decisions that member states take Of course, this is, but the UN continues to have this role of walking together, of supporting countries as they have to face the big challenges that we have today, including the development challenges. We have seen, unfortunately, the rise of poverty around the world, the rise of hunger, deepening inequalities, more conflicts. So the world of today, I would say, requires greater, as I mentioned at the beginning, greater collective action, more multilateralism, and bringing together the groups that have tremendous power in the world of today, such as BRICS, the G20, in all these groupings that need to converge in a global platform. This global platform is called the United Nations.
Thank you, María Fernanda Espinosa, for speaking to us on Focal Length. We're very, very delighted to be with you and hear from you. Thank you. Now, with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Focal Length. For more international news and expert analysis, stay tuned to NewsX World.